sooner or later, everybody's bill comes due. And I hate to kind of introduce that after this lovely, lovely, peaceful guitar. It's just beautiful. Thank you. Thank you very much. But I'm going to. So everybody's bill comes due at some point. This talk is not near as ominous as it sounds, however. For me, it actually came out, it's a line from the Divine Secrets of the Yaya Sisterhood. And in the movie, it's with regard to someone keeping a secret that actually other people had a right to know. And as a woman with a past, I feel like many of my bills have come due. Many of my bills have come due. Many were paid before they hit that proverbial mailbox. And can I move this? Because I feel like I can't.
Do whatever you want.
I feel like you set it up and I shouldn't touch it. Does that work?
Yeah.
Okay, that's better. Anyway, and there are many other bills I have that have not yet been paid. And what this phrase means to me is that eventually everyone has to pay for the deeds they do, good or bad, throughout the course of their life. Everybody's bill comes due. In Eastern religions and faiths like Buddhism, they would be calling this karma. In AA, they call it taking a searching and fearless moral inventory of themselves. And eventually you make amends when and where possible. Through the process of what's called the fourth step, you begin recognizing things that you've done and behaviors that you've exhibited. Anything that you have said or done where you might still feel guilty, or you still carry shame about behaviors that you've had in the past, you try to rectify as you go forward. And what we come to realize, it's not the what we did necessarily, a lot of times it's the why we did it, those feelings behind those actions that we took, regardless of the reasoning behind the actions themselves. And what we get from that is that we cannot correct the past. We can simply start to create a better future. So if you take it as everyone's bill comes due as a metaphor, then it means that there has to be payback always. You have to suffer. You have to pay for the things that you've done, suffer the consequences, and then hopefully learn from that and go on. But what follows you around individually? What is it that follows you around on a daily basis? What are you willing to let go of, like they do in AA theoretically, to move into a better self of who you are? A personal story for me, which has been in the forefront of my mind since I started thinking of this topic. As I said before, my dad died when I was 10 years clean and sober. This isn't about that. It's not my relationship with him. It's about something I did during that time. That's what this story is about. So about 8 years prior to my father transitioning, I was living in Minneapolis. A girlfriend and I exchanged rings at that time, so I'm not even going to try to figure out how old I was. It's just like that, I don't know. I was younger than 30, let's say. We exchanged rings, and a couple of years later we broke up. I found myself living in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and then my dad started his transition. So I don't know why. I took that ring and I had it sized to fit this ring finger, the little finger on my right hand. And I started telling people when I got back to Albuquerque that my family had thrown a 10-year sobriety party for me at the hospital, and that this was my grandfather's ring that they had sized to fit me. I don't know why. I can hypothesize. I can say that I wanted to show people that I was loved. Clearly I didn't feel like I was valuable. There's all sorts of reasons why, but I told that story for clear on to 15 years. Now keep in mind, I was a clean and sober woman. I still am a clean and sober woman, but I was dealing with a lot. I wasn't emotionally healthy, as I just stated. My self-esteem was pretty low, and who knows why I did that. But no one in Albuquerque knew my former girlfriend. No one questioned me. And I wore that ring, told the story. And somehow it represented for me that I was good enough to be cared for. Anyway, around the 20-year mark, of my sobriety, I got seriously, seriously ill, and we didn't think that I was going to make it. And I don't have close connections with my family, so a few close friends and I were in the hospital, and I was telling them what I wanted to do with my stuff. One of my very, very close friends asked me if she could have my grandfather's ring. And until that moment, I had seriously forgotten it was a lie. And I know I must have looked like I was about to die, which I was. And I shrugged off this little warning sign in my head, and I said yes. Well, obviously I didn't die. So I'm grateful to be here. And the entire story in these lies really started to bother me. So I took another fourth. I talked to someone. I decided to start telling the truth. And I believe at that point there were two women in my life who were truly affected by this story. So I talked to them, and one of them, when she learned the truth, stepped out of my life forever. She was a very close friend, and she said goodbye. And it still breaks my heart. The other told me there was nothing I could ever do but become a better person, and she is still in my life. And in fact, I just spent a week with her in College Park just a week ago. Now, I can't say that this is the worst thing that's ever happened to me in terms of bills coming due. And this will not by far the worst thing I've ever done. But it's one of those things in terms of, I don't know, ethics that continued to weigh on my mind. So just to finish the story, I kept the ring another 5 years. I wore it, and if someone asked me about it, I told them the truth. I told them that it was a former girlfriend. It's pretty, isn't it? And that I had it cut down to size. And one day when I was in Maryland in College Park and I was running around Lake Artemisia, I stopped and I thought it's time to let it go. So I took it off, I said a prayer, and I threw it into the middle of the lake. Now, I know there are some who hear this story and will never fully trust me, even many years later. And there are others who will hear it and consider it a story about growth. And to tell you the truth, I don't really care what you think, honestly.
Good.
The point of relating this is that sooner or later is that everybody's bill comes due. And for me, this bill was both an incredible loss and an incredible gain. The woman who walked out of my life, a very, very close friend, and one I still think about frequently. And the other is my closest friend, and probably will always be. I know, too, that I have done things when the bill came due that it was in my favor. That someone approached me and they said, what you did, what you said to me years later, years before, changed my life. And when people come up and thank us out of the blue for influencing them, it may be something we've long forgotten that we've said or did, and it's just an amazing feeling to know that we've been gifted that way. What we're talking about here in New Thought is what we call that universal law of mind, which is neutral and subjective, and it's intelligent, and it gives back to us what we put into it. We talk about the principle of science of mind, which Ernest Holmes states is a principle of being, a source or cause from which a thing results, a truth which is unchangeable. Holmes says, we first understand the principle and then we relate it to our problem for a final text. On this, he also cites the Bible, James 2, 1-11, but he summarizes that passage by saying the law is no respecter of persons. Many think that within the science of mind, faith or teaching is that they speak a lot of duality, that we have God and that we have the law. But, and this confused me for many years, that the universal spirit is natural goodness, eternal freedom, pure loving kindness, and the law is the fact, returning to each the results of their acts. And principle and law, which are two very significant and different things, and yet they're the same thing, and this was a point that confused me for many years. And now I use the analogy of fruit as God. So just stay with me. If you think of God as a fruit, then an apple and an orange are both a concept of the divine. or a concept of fruit, God. But they are categorically different fruit. One is a poem and one is a citrus, both with different seeds and a different purpose for what they are. And yet, this is the law in action. It's different but equal, and this is the divine process. What we do wrong and what we do right, there are consequences, both positive and negative, and those bills always come due. There is no sin but a mistake. There is no punishment but a consequence. And then Emerson says, there is no sin but ignorance. For if we knew the truth, we would not misuse the law. And if we know the truth of God, then we would not misuse the law by what we put into it, in terms of what we get out of it. We cannot escape the creative power of our thought. All we need do is use this law from the right motive, and then we shall be made free. That's a quote. I don't know about that quote. And then we shall be made free. But again, we're somewhat faced with the duality of right and wrong. But at breakfast with a group of women a couple of weeks ago, I found myself in one of those interesting conversations which ranged from everything to zombies, which led to organ donation, which led to tattoos and faith-based religions. I really love these conversations because they make me think. And they make me be aware of different cultures and faiths and customs. And I would love to tell you how this conversation got to each topic, but I'm not even sure how we got to all those things. But what is apparent to me is that those topics were as disparate as the group of women who were sitting at these tables. We were all individuals with similar faiths, but incredibly different laws that guide our lives. And we're all different categories of fruit, so to speak. In the end, it always comes down to individual choice, and the individual choice of what a moral choice is, and who we present to be. A bit like the story I told earlier. Who do you present to be at any given time? What is your story behind who you are today? My talks are frequently about self-reflection and learning how to use your voice. And in these uncertain times, it can be challenging to know what to say and what to do without offending someone, or am I making the right choices? And when I say I do not believe in organ donation, there are always someone to explain to me carefully why my belief is wrong, because someone they love has had a life saved through someone's organ donation. Again, it's a personal choice. Who knows if it's right or wrong in these circumstances, if it's God's will or if it's just someone's bill coming due? We need to ask ourselves these questions. And as we ask ourselves these questions, if we're so vehement in our responses, then how can we separate who we are from some of our choices, but we can't separate who we are from other choices? How can you separate your politics from your spirituality? I was told organ donation is not a political decision, but a moral decision, implying that my morality, or else maybe my spiritual program, was in question. Perhaps. Political, spiritual, moral, who's to say? What is right or wrong is that we know the truth in here. I knew I was lying those years ago. I know when I'm lying to myself now. And that puts the law in action. I know that we've had this conversation many times in the past about what we know is right or wrong, and if we're lying to ourselves. And we know that sooner or later everyone's bill comes due, including our own. And so ask yourself these questions. If you have a heart symbol on your driver's license, which indicates that you're an organ donor, but you don't actively donate an organ tomorrow, is that enough? That you did not volunteer your own body for someone else? If you claim compassion for children in cages, for people in poverty, for people in violent situations, but you do nothing that acknowledge it's wrong, is that enough? Just to say, boy, that sucks, I know that that's wrong, I wish them the best, they have my thoughts and prayers, is that enough? Is that enough for you? I have no idea what you do or what you believe in. I don't know. And I'm only asking you to ask yourself these questions. In the face of what appears to be overwhelming adversity, what do you do? And always remember, we are dealing with the law. Each one of us is here today as a result of what has gone before, regardless. In science of mind, they call that race consciousness, that either consciously or unconsciously, this is something that we've created and that we've contributed to it, our culture. During that breakfast conversation that I mentioned, I had a huge awakening. Someone asked how we, as a culture, got to the place that we're in right now, where greed and profit has become the focus over the human condition and the safety of the earth, where the top 3 to 5% control our country. How did we get here, she was asking. And I realized that in every new thought center, save this one, which is the honest truth to me, that the focus has been on the concept of abundance and prosperity and how we get money from our culture to improve our lives. We say it's abundance and prosperity for all, that everyone has enough and more than enough to meet their needs and to do with what they want, but there's an inequality in that premise. It's not about the money. And I know a minister who actively has prosperity classes for 8 weeks every year. And she says, money doesn't create happiness or solve issues, but it certainly makes life easier. And does it really? Does it? The more money we get, sometimes the more difficult my life is. And I look at some of the lives of people I know, and in my own judgment, I think, everybody's bill comes due. And then I have to deal with my own stuff around my fear of lack. It's not about that. Yet we look at the world we live in, and not just in your community or in the country, but of the world, and the world where so many of us are controlled by that fear of lack. And what is that? Because we've put that into the consciousness. We've created this world. This is our focus, and this is the focus of the top 3 to 5% as well. So if in our congregations we're going prosperity, 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 it's out there, it's theirs too. So the inequality continues in the same manner that it's set, because that's what we're looking at. It's the focus. But the economy doesn't run on money, it runs on people. And it's on the energy that we give it. So what is morality? What is right or wrong? Again, these are individual beliefs, and what you do is up to you. But I believe that we need to show up in faith. And if this is really what we believe, that the law of universal mind creates our world, then it's important that we have the courage to stand up, to speak up, to be better, and to do more. Universal law and how that future will unfold is in your hands right now. It absolutely rests in our minds and our acts. Holmes, in the original Science of Mind, states that whatever we think, act, believe in, feel, visualize, vision, image, read, talk about, in fact, all processes which affect or impress us at all are going into the subjective state of our thought, which is our individualized use of mind. And whatever goes into subjective state of thought tends to return again as a condition. And I've talked about this before here in other ways, that what we believe, what we state is what we create. Everyone's bill eventually comes due, and everyone has a bill. And when you stand on the other side of history, when you stand on the other side of history, possibly tonight, as soon as tomorrow, or next week, what will be your legacy for our world and for our culture, for your community here? What I know for myself is that I want the consequences of my thoughts and actions to be a positive effect for others. A few years ago, I came to understand my divine purpose was to plant and facilitate seeds of understanding and interconnectedness, to facilitate growth between us and understanding. And for me, this bill was both an incredible bill of life. It's not always easy awareness for me to act within this. I have to pay my due on things I do all the time. If I don't pay feed my cats, they let me know, right? And so, and that works its way up, because if I don't have the money to feed my cats, then my cats aren't going to get paid. It's a cycle. And so then if I have a fear of lack, I treat for abundance. And what am I really treating for, though? What am I really praying for? And what I'm really praying for is the safety and the freedom and the ability to be fed and clothed, each one of us equally, to what we need. That's what I really want. I want to be able to feed my cats to the best of my ability, not the best cat food necessarily. I hope that makes sense. But this is my bill of life. I encourage you to find your path and then step back into it with faith and courage, knowing there is only a very fine line that separates you from others. We are all individualized manifestations of the divine. Any and all of our differences lead us back to the whole, lead us back to the one. Recognize God in others, and then trust your faith to guide your actions. Namaste.